I think everyone in the room who has worked in the community energy sector over the last 10 years recognises the journey that has just, I suppose, been demonstrated this morning in terms of where the department is, where the supports are, and the potential impact of that fairly sizable shift in energy policy that has been demonstrated this morning. So I personally would like to thank Enda on behalf of the community energy sector for all of his hard work that is ongoing, and he has a lot of hard work left, I'm sure he recognises. So we have about 15-20 minutes for questions and answers. I think it's important to say if you have a question, please don't use it for grandstanding. So just say who you are and keep your question relatively brief, and we'll get the speakers to answer. So without further ado, I'll open up to the floor. So we have a question here. There's a microphone there behind you, just so everyone can hear. And remember, we have people online as well. So
I'd just like to address a question to the last speaker. You mentioned mentors and expert advisors. Can I ask you, I should say I'm representing Duisburg Sustainable Energy Community. My question is, do you propose that those mentors might look at a sustainable community and advise them on what type of electrical generation system, such as PV or solar or wind or another suggestion, that these advisors might suggest what type of system might be suitable for their community or their area?
Yeah. The idea is.
That's for the camera.
Oh, yeah.
just
Speak out, yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks, Warren.
I think it's on. Hang on, click it back up.
Yeah. No.
Click it up.
Yeah. The idea is that I suppose under the existing SEC framework, those mentors are also assisting in terms of developing the energy master plan, and there's a grant in place, I suppose largely for consultants to come in and do an energy master plan in consultation with the community. In theory, the energy master plan should identify potential projects or areas where projects might be valuable or may arise. So that would be the starting point, I think, and then thereafter the mentors under this scheme should be able to take those forward then with yourselves.
Paul O'Sullivan, Tancredo Community Loan Finance. Just a question again in relation to the proposal for that 5% of the equity on a developer-led renewable energy project be initially offered to local and then our local community groups, say the local, say the Athenry Community Development CLG.
Yeah.
Is that
eligible
to purchase shares under your proposed scheme, or must it be real persons?
No, and the offer will be open to individuals and to not-for-profit entities. Okay. It does include sports clubs and whatever. Yeah.
Again, it was on the community investments. I'm trying to remember this. I had another question on Germany on the developer side of things, which was we visited Pfaffenhofen or training visited Pfaffenhofen in Bavaria, and they mentioned like that the price is somewhere around 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and that very few people had applied there, even though it's suppose mooted as the big opportunity. That was only maybe one, I think, application in the last year or so there for wind development. So it does seem like there's an issue around pricing or the
Yes, that's unfortunately correct. If the price is, the maximum bid price is set at 6.2 cents, and you do the math, there it is, sorry, it wasn't on. And you do the math, and the 6.2 cents just isn't enough, then the calculation doesn't work for you. That's quite accurate. And again, this goes back to this focus on best resources. So up until a few years ago, there was more of an adjustment factor that was used. So you could put up wind turbines in not so windy locations, but the sort of group that wants the prices to come down or the costs also to come down just sort of won the political debate. And the problem that we have is you can also bring costs down for the transition by just not doing it. So the cost impact of wind power is also relative to how much you build, right? So we have quite a dilemma on our hands right now because it's not just about the price, it's also that the volume has fallen out.
Take another question here.
To Tom Burton, consultant on sustainable energy projects. I just wanted to direct, welcome very much all of the detail that's pending on the res, and direct a question to Enda in that regard, the supports to communities. I wonder if you can elaborate on the rationale for directing everything through commencing with an SEC, which is obviously a great initiative, but I see it in many ways as being a very different type of business and a very different skill set, doing an SEC to actually developing a generation project, extremely different. And now, what it looks to me like you're saying, often cut your teeth by developing a completely alternate type of business before you invest in a community. And just a sort of final point on this, an SEC will naturally exclude very many people who, it tends to attract sort of homeowners or people that are not living in apartments or not urban dwellers, generalised, but it's a particular subset, and that there are many other types of communities that might be interested in.
Yeah, I suppose we're looking to try and join up the thinking and the approach to all of this in the first instance. I do take the point for sure. SECs maybe don't necessarily need to be the entire sort of basis for it. I suppose what we're suggesting is that there are going to be different models here in terms of delivering a project and different consortium types, and we think that an SEC should be part of the structure of the project. I think that would be good practice anyway, because look, these are indicative of a bunch of people in a community who have essentially put their hand up to say we're interested in energy matters, and we mightn't know exactly where we're going with this, but we've put our hands up because we are. So we see SEC has been central, but not sort of the critical component. In addition, I would say, that's the journey I laid out there is the recommended journey as we see it. Obviously, if you're a Messi or a Ronaldo, you might be able to jump straight into electricity generation. And I think, for instance, like some communities might have a number of engineers, for instance, living in the facility who actually might be able to kick off a project quite easily. So we're not adverse to that, but the recommendation, I suppose, is just try and get communities to approach this in a structured way.
I'll take this question here.
Thanks. I'm Mary Byrne from NUI Galway. Given that our own research in NUIG and research by the ESRI has suggested that the majority of the Irish public don't want to be involved in owning wind farms or investing in wind farms or share schemes, and our own research actually indicates that offering share schemes leads to worse outcomes in terms of community acceptance than offering no benefits at all. And given the obstacles that the two speakers have faced in their own countries in terms of share schemes and community ownership, are we sure that the 4 pillars that we've outlined are the correct ones in terms of increasing community acceptance and developing large-scale development over the next 10 years or so?
I might ask Craig to answer that first, if I could, just your perspective from Germany before Enda.
I would love to see that data.
Maybe you can send me an email if you've published it online. I unfortunately must agree that probably most people don't want to be involved, but what we also know, and I think you kind of hinted at this, it's not so much about my personal involvement. In fact, we have done similar, we in Germany have done similar surveys showing why people like a wind farm, for instance. And usually it's not I benefit personally. The main factor is usually it's good for the community, and I can see that. So whether I'm involved or not, if I understand that my neighbors have benefited, that this guy, you know, his shop didn't close because he's able to do some operations and maintenance on something, I can see that the community's holding together better because of this. You know, the bridge that I showed you, these kind of things. If we can identify that and communicate that, then I think we can get this broad mass, the majority of the public that doesn't want to be bothered with all of this. We can get them to actively welcome these things. That's what I suspect.
And do you want to make a comment?
Part of your question was, am I sure? No. But like, to be honest, we have done a lot of research as well, and you'd be aware from the high-level design, I suspect that underpinning that in terms of the community provisions was one very comprehensive report that was done by Ricardo, which looked at best practice in other jurisdictions, including both Denmark and Germany. And I suppose in subsequent to that, like all of the engagements that we've had, and particularly with those representing the community sector, many of them in this room, they've all been crying out for this kind of support structure. And you know, they have a genuine belief that this will kick off. I think in terms of the investment, yeah, I take the point that you've done good research in that area, and it doesn't look like from that research that there is an appetite. That's why we've tried to put in place a very simple citizen investment in good, clean, green energy vehicle, where all of the projects are in this scheme from the outset, and where we can actually do some proper marketing and promotion of it, and the developers will also be essential to that. So I think if you put a simple proposition to the Irish people, where it's de-risked as much as possible, and we have done that, then I think there will be an appetite personally.
Sarah Kendra from the Marai Centre for Marine and Renewable Energy at University College Cork. So my colleague here and I are working on the Airwind project, looking at the development of offshore wind specifically for Ireland. And one aspect of our work is looking at different benefit sharing mechanisms and community participation in offshore wind. And I suppose some of the issues that we've come up against are that some of these projects can be located very far offshore, so the question of kind of who is the community, especially for some of the floating wind projects, and then the scale of investment, given the scale of investment required, how do you get communities to participate in these types of projects? So I suppose my question, one for Enda, is what could community participation in offshore wind look like for Ireland? And then maybe could Louise or Craig comment on the experiences in Germany or Denmark, and are there any lessons that we can learn in Ireland around that?
Yeah, so on offshore, you're right, there'll have to be tweaking to the models for that, and I suppose whilst offshore projects can bid into this first auction, it's probably more realistic to think that they'll benefit from the second auction, which has been flagged for 2021. We do need to look at the communities, because obviously you don't have this radius and so on, but you do have close proximity features. But also I think the sort of apparatus that we're putting in place in terms of extending offerings to nationwide citizens, I think that kind of thing will help us to brush up in terms of offshore. I mean, if all the citizens of Ireland have the opportunity to ultimately invest in an offshore project, I think no matter what its scale, there is a real opportunity that the full 5% that we're proposing at the moment will be taken up. But it will be significant amounts of money, and I think in order for citizens to put their hands in their pockets to invest, I think it is all about this concept of trust in the scheme. So we're really hoping that we can get this scheme, sorted and so on. It's gone out, or it's going out in the public consultation, and we have to see what feedback we get. And there are some legal and government approvals and so on that needs to be required. But fingers crossed.
Louise or Craig?
I can try. I don't know if we have any example of offshore, but we have some examples of nearshore wind turbines where they have made these funds that I was talking about in Hvidovre. So that some of the projects are actually owned by a local fund that can feed into the local society. That could be to make a new sports facilitation or anything, and that way they actually raise a lot of public support through that. So that's one example. They've done that. I think it's in Samsø in Denmark. They have done that a lot. And Ærø.
Okay, I'll take a question down here.
Yeah. I've got a question for Enda about the 5% investment scheme for the developer-led projects.
You might just say where you're.
My name is Brian Barron, and I'm with Train SEC. I was wondering if those shares would have voting power, would they be giving control to the local people that will be benefiting as well?
Yeah, good question. I think, again, we looked at this in serious detail, and I think maybe coming back to other questions here and the appetite for citizens to invest in these schemes or in renewable energy in general. No, the proposal is that it's, from the point of view of the investor, it's essentially a revenue share model, and from the point of view of the developer, it's a debt model. That's the way it sort of pans out. It's not an equity share because there's significant risk attached to taking, an equity stake in a project, and we don't think that there's an appetite for that kind of risk. So we've tried to de-risk it, and in that regard, it's a revenue model with baseline returns indicated, but subject to revenues generating from the project.
Yeah. Sorry, my name is JP Prendergast. I'm from the Kilmarnock Western District Energy Co-op. We're part of the Community Power Group as well. I'd just like to thank Enda for all the hard work he's done because he's under a lot of pressure. And I know it's been a tough journey and probably a long way to go yet, but it's definitely a great announcement made today. I think it was very positive. Just a small poking question there for you, and do you have a time frame maybe on the progress of this first auction, when you think this may be happening, or on that?
Yeah, there would have to be a thing in the tail, JB. Yeah, we've committed to the auction taking place in June of next year. Yeah, so like there's because auctions are new for Ireland. Like they're relatively new in the last half decade or so across the world, but this is our first one. So there has been a huge amount of planning and so on required, and we've started now in terms of engagements with particularly industry. We've had 2 sessions with industry already where we've outlined the approach to the auctions. We will do one of those as well with communities, probably around February, I suspect. There aren't that many community projects that are eligible for the first auction, which is June next year. That's just because of the eligibility criteria require that you have grid access, you have a grid connection, and you have planning. And those are there for good reasons, and we're not changing that. But we still expect that there'll be at least a few community projects that are in that space, and we'll be trying to get those through the auction process. I mean, when you think of the pain we've experienced on state aid, the idea of us not delivering community projects through the scheme you know, because of, you know, inaction or a lack of help, it just doesn't wash. So.
Okay, 2 more questions.
John Kinney from Galway Engineering Systems. Just a quick question. Just wondering about the impact of the renewable electricity scheme, particularly on projects that might be more integrated, so more like biomethane, road transport fuels, energy efficiency. This particular scheme will just focus on the electricity side, and I wonder will that mean that there'll be fewer integrated projects as a result? People will focus on electricity where the incentives are.
I think no comment at this point, on the basis that really the whole focus of my division in the department has been to get the electricity scheme through. So I think in time we will certainly be looking at other initiatives and so on, but this has been an all hands on deck initiative.
Gavin Forkin from Plan Energy. Thanks very much to the presenters. I'm interested, and if you wouldn't mind outlining something about the time frame for these trusted intermediaries. If they're to take the energy master plans from communities on into realistic projects, when is that group supposed to be up and running?
Yeah, I suppose first of all we have to secure the Minister's approval to appoint SEAI to be the implementing body for communities in this scheme, because then SEAI will set about procuring those type of services and so on. One of the reasons we haven't appointed the SEAI to date is just the complexity around the citizen investment scheme piece, this big clean green scheme I've talked about. We just need to be certain of what the precise requirements for SEAI are in that regard. So we would have appointed them sooner, subject to Minister's approval. Once we get them in place, we will start building the framework. I mean, in essence, we just need to start off with one trusted intermediary and one provider of legal services, one of financial, you know, and so on. So it will start off quite small. We have secured a funding line from the Department of Public Expenditure for this, and we've put in for an allocation of human resources as well to deliver this. So again, you know, we would hope to be successful in that regard, but it kicks off slowly. Sorry, it kicks off on a small basis from early next year. Just on the energy master plan, I mean, the energy master plan under the SEC program kind of progresses as normal, and as I say, we're hoping that that plan will identify potential projects that can then be looked at.
I'll take a final question from John.
John Fogarty from Tipperary and Community Power. I think to add to what JP has already said, I'd like to congratulate him, because we're all very aware of the amount of sweat and work that went into producing this. Sort of in one stroke, he's eliminated the biggest part of the financial block by including our community in the first place and ring fencing a section for community. I think from the outset we all knew that the finance, grid and planning were the three big obstacles, and finance has been largely addressed here. I think in your presentation, Enda, you outlined in a couple of places that one of the barriers still is grid connection, and I'm not sure, maybe a lot of people may not be aware that if they decided to build a renewable energy project tomorrow, it would probably take them about 7 years to get connected to the grid, the way things are at the moment, which is very hard to keep the community group active in that time. So I think I see that maybe the CRU, the regulator, and networks are trying to do something to address this. And I see that you mentioned that they will connect 15 projects per annum, but 15 projects per annum could be 200 kilowatts. So if in the first option you're given a commitment to say 20 megawatts, well then networks needs to
Sean. You're right. I mean, the grid is critical, and I do think what I've referenced today is game changing. I think getting the regulator and the system operators, ESB networks and so on, into the room and trying to thrash this out has led to a sea change already in thinking and approach. And I think that has significantly kicked off in that consultation that I mentioned around the 15 connections. I have no doubt in my mind at this point that ESB networks are genuinely committed to delivering on community energy. And I think given that the CRU have gone out to public consultation, I think if you understand the way they work, they're going out with essentially what are proposed decisions. So I fully expect this to be confirmed as official connection policy in probably Q2 of next year. So I think it can be delivered on January.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you very much to our speakers. There's tea and coffee outside and a little snack. We have an hour session on biogas, so have a cup of coffee, bring it back in, and then we'll have our biogas session.